We're moving in Cala, me, the kids, and my mom. It's already decided. That was the first thing Loretta said to me that morning, standing in my own kitchen, like she was reading off a grocery list. No good morning, no question, no conversation. Just that cold, final, full of expectation. Then Damon stepped in behind her, tossed his keys on the counter and added, without looking at me, we talked about it. It's temporary. They're cramped in the apartment, and it just makes sense. Don't make this difficult. He said it like this house wasn't mine. Like I hadn't spent 40 years scrubbing other people's floors to afford it. Like I wasn't still paying property taxes with my retirement check. As if I were just a piece of old furniture he could shuffle around to make room for his plans. I stood by the sink, coffee pot in hand, watching him walk across my living room. He moved like he owned the walls, like he had paid for the sofa, the rug, the family photos still hanging above the stairs. Loretta followed behind him, already pointing toward corners. The playpen could go here, she said, or maybe over there near the window. More light. Not once did either of them look at me. I poured the coffee into my mug slowly, carefully. My hands didn't shake, but they wanted to. Damon turned around, arms crossed. It's not up for debate, Mom. We don't have time to drag this out. Loretta's mom. Ottilia, she's not doing well, and we can't afford a full-time nurse. You're alone here. It's logical. Logical. He used that word like it excused everything, like it made it okay to decide my life without me. I said nothing, not yet. I've learned in life that silence unsettles people more than rage, and I wanted him unsettled. He took my quiet for consent. Saturday, he said. That's when we'll move in. The kids can sleep in the sewing room, Loretta, and I'll use the pull-out sofa for now. It won't be forever. And honestly, Mom, it'll be good for you. You're not young anymore. It's risky living alone. There it was. That line they all start to use once a woman hits 70. You're not young anymore. As if my age makes me an object of pity or a liability to be managed. As if I hadn't lived alone for the past 9 years since Harold passed and done just fine. As if I hadn't raised 5 kids without ever asking for a thing from any of them. Still, I said nothing. Loretta gave me a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. The kids are thrilled. They'll have more space and it'll be nice for Ottilia to be around family. You won't even notice we're here. I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone cold. Damon moved toward the front door, already texting someone. We'll bring some boxes tomorrow, just to start sorting space. Make some room in the sewing room if you can. He didn't wait for an answer. He didn't ask if I needed anything. He didn't notice the expression on my face at all. When they left, Loretta's perfume lingered in the hallway, like a warning. I stood alone in my kitchen, the same place I'd stood for decades, making meals, packing lunches, waiting for news, hearing laughter and slammed doors. It had always been my place of control, of rhythm. Now, for the first time, it felt invaded, but not lost. Because while they were laying out their plans for my house, I was already planning something else. Something that didn't include bunk beds in my sewing room or Ottilia's pill bottles on my bathroom sink. I stood by the sink long after they left, staring into the mug between my palms. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I held it anyway. Something about the weight of it anchored me, reminded me this was still my kitchen. Still my home, for now. They'd spoken like they were doing me a favor, like offering me their presence was a gift. Loretta, with her brittle smile, and Damon with that clipped, dismissive tone he always used when he wanted me to stay quiet. As if I hadn't once held his fevered body through the night, rocked him, when he cried over scraped knees, taught him how to tie his shoes, and say thank you. He used to ask my permission for everything, from sleepovers to second helpings. Now he moved through my house like I was a guest in it. I ran a dish towel over the countertop that didn't need cleaning. Old habit. 40 years of my life were spent scrubbing floors that weren't mine, ironing shirts I couldn't afford to wear, making other people's beds, while coming home to sleep on a secondhand mattress. I'd cleaned the homes of lawyers, bankers, professors. Their diplomas framed their furniture, polished their children, loud and careless. I did it with a quiet sort of pride, not because I liked it, but because it was honest work. Work that bought this house. Work that put my 5 children through school well through enough of it. Damon made it furthest. 2 years at community college, then he dropped out to drive trucks. Claimed school wasn't for him. Claimed he needed to make money fast because nobody gets rich with a degree. I never argued. I was too tired, too busy making ends meet to make a fuss. When Harold died, I thought the worst of the storms were behind me. He was a good man, not perfect, but steady. His death was sudden. One moment we were arguing over groceries, the next I was planning a funeral alone. Damon was 27 then, still living at home. He cried like a child the day we buried his father, and I, the one who held it all together, still cooked dinner that night because someone had to. After Harold, I didn't remarry. Not because I couldn't, but because I had finally tasted peace. No one else's laundry to fold. No expectations waiting for me when I walked through the door. Just silence and space and my own rhythm. And now they wanted to take that away. Damon, Loretta, their 2 loud kids, and Loretta's mother, a woman I'd met 3 times tops, were about to squeeze themselves into every corner of my life. Without so much as a question, I wiped the table, opened the fridge, closed it again. I'd fought for everything I had. The house wasn't much by some standards, an old 2-bedroom with creaky stairs and plumbing that needed attention, but it was mine. Every tile, every chipped corner, every patch of uneven paint had a story. I remembered buying the sewing machine that sat in the converted guest room secondhand from a church friend. I remembered the first night sleeping alone in the master bedroom after Harold died, curling my back to the emptiness and waiting for the grief to fade. It hadn't, not entirely, but I'd learned to live with it. Now I had to learn something else, how to say no. I'd said yes for so many years I didn't even realize when I started doing it automatically. Yes to extra shifts. Yes to missed birthdays. Yes to every last-minute favor, every sacrifice no one remembered a week later. No one ever taught me that saying no was an option. But maybe it was time I taught myself. I folded the towel, set the cup in the sink. I walked to the sewing room, my sanctuary, and looked around. Fabric stacked neatly in color-coded rows. Patterns pinned on the wall. Projects in progress folded just so. They wanted to clear this room for their kids. They had no idea what they were stepping into. Because while they were busy packing boxes, I was about to start unpacking something else, my spine. "Hi, Mom." Loretta chirped, her voice lined with the kind of sweetness that clung like dust. She stood at my doorstep with a plastic-wrapped tray and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "I brought you some coffee cake from the shop, fresh this morning." I let her in without a word. It was easier that way. She made herself comfortable like always, kicking off her shoes near the entry, setting the tray down in my kitchen like it was hers. She didn't wait to be invited. She never did. "It's walnut streusel," she added, as though that would soften the blow she was about to deliver. I poured 2 mugs of coffee and set them on the table. She took hers with cream, 3 sugars. I remembered only because she never stopped reminding me. She sipped, then sighed. "So, Damon told you we're moving in Saturday, right? The movers are coming around 10. I nodded, taking a slow sip of my own coffee. I made no comment about how I hadn't agreed, because it wouldn't have mattered. Loretta tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and leaned forward like we were 2 girlfriends conspiring over something harmless. "I know it's a tight squeeze, but just for a while, okay? Mom'll be in the guest room. She really can't be on her own anymore. Bless her, she gets confused, forgets her pills. And Leandro and Jules will take your sewing room. They're so excited they want to help decorate it with dinosaur decals and glow stars. My throat tightened. I didn't respond. Loretta laughed lightly, mistaking my silence for agreement. And Damon and I will take the living room. The pullout's not great, but we'll make do. Just until we find a bigger place. We're already looking. She paused. Rent's crazy, you know. She looked at me like I was supposed to confirm that. To empathize. But I only nodded again. She kept going. Oh, and about the utilities, Damon said we'd pitch in. We're not freeloaders, I promise. We'll help with groceries, too. It's just, this really helps us out. And you'll love having the kids around. They're so good with you. As if I was the one who needed convincing. As if this arrangement was about family bonding and not desperation dressed up in convenience. I looked out the window over the sink. The garden beds I'd worked so hard to keep alive were thinning in the heat. My roses needed trimming. My tomatoes were overripe. It occurred to me that I hadn't spent time out there in weeks. I'd been too unsettled, too busy circling the same thoughts over and over. Loretta didn't notice my silence. Or maybe she didn't care. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a handful of color swatches. Do you think this green's too much for the kids' new room? I know it's your sewing space and all, but we want it to feel like their own. Damon thought jungle theme. Something playful. I smiled just enough to be polite. Then I stood, took my coffee, and walked toward the sewing room. Loretta followed without hesitation. She gasped a little. Wow, it's so organized in here. You really have a system. I did. Spools and threads lined the back wall. Bins of fabric sorted by season and pattern. A dress half finished on the mannequin. The quilt I'd been hand-stitching for 6 months folded neatly over the armchair. My sanctuary. My work. My peace. Leandro's obsessed with dinosaurs, she said again. Stepping in, further her eyes roaming. He'll love this space. Big window, too. She had no idea that every word was sharpening something inside me. Every casual assumption, every claim made without question, chipped away at my patience and shaped something colder beneath it. I turned to her with the same smile I'd worn since she arrived. I'm glad the kids are excited. Really? That's so sweet of you, she beamed. I nodded. They'll have everything they need. Because they would. Everything they'd need to learn that this wasn't going to be what they thought. Loretta left an hour later, still talking about decals and wall hooks, thinking she'd won. But the moment the door clicked shut behind her, I walked straight to the kitchen drawer, pulled out a pen, and flipped open the old spiral notebook I kept by the phone. And I started writing a list. I waited until the house was silent again. Then I rinsed the mugs, tossed the untouched slice of coffee cake into the trash, and sat with my list. It was short, 4 items. But each one mattered more than anything I'd written in years. After rereading it twice, I folded the page and slipped it between the pages of a dog-eared cookbook I never used anymore. Then I reached for the phone. Maris, I said as soon as she picked up, you free for a walk? She didn't ask why I was calling midweek. She just said, 20 minutes. Same spot. That's how it had always been with us. We'd met in a sewing class 15 years ago, bonded over our distaste for passive-aggressive daughters-in-law, and kept each other sane through widowhood foot surgeries and family drama too ridiculous to put in writing. By the time I reached the park, she was already there. Gray hoodie zipped to her neck hair in the same short bob she'd worn since Clinton was president. You look like you've got a storm behind those glasses, she said, linking her arm through mine. I might, I murmured. We walked in silence for a few minutes, the gravel path crunching underfoot. The breeze was soft today, light enough to carry snippets of children's laughter from the playground. Maris pulled a thermos from her bag. Coffee. Don't worry, it's strong. I took a sip. You always know. I always guess. We sat on the same bench near the dogwood tree, our bench. 2 other women we knew waved as they passed. Retired nurses, both of them. Maris waved back and leaned in close. So she said, "You want to talk about it? Or let it rot your gut from the inside out?" I looked straight ahead. "Do you remember when Wes and Dana moved in with you? Right after your gallbladder surgery?" She snorted. "Moved in. They invaded. I couldn't sneeze without one of them barging in, asking if I'd remembered to take my pills. And how long were they supposed to stay? A month?" She scoffed. "They were still there 9 months later." I nodded. "How did you get them out?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I stopped being polite. We were quiet again. The birds overhead squabbled in the branches. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked and a child shrieked with delight. "They're coming this weekend," I said finally. She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Loretta brought over coffee cake today. Told me how the kids would love their new rooms and how Ottilia can't be left alone anymore. Damon said it was already decided. No one asked me if I was okay with it. Maris took a slow sip from her thermos. "Of course they didn't. You're the easiest yes they've ever had." "Not this time," I said softly. She turned to look at me. "You told them that?" "Not yet." She chuckled dryly. "Ah, so the storm's still building." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and handed her a folded slip of paper. She read it once, then again. "Well," she said, folding it neatly and handing it back. "You always were the quiet type, but I've seen what happens when you dig your heels in." "I'm not angry," I said. "Not exactly." "No," she agreed. "You're done." We sat there together a while longer. I talked about the sewing room. She told me Dana had started texting again, tentative guilt-laced messages about family dinners. Neither of us was surprised. When it was time to head back, I rose, stretched, and looked down the path. "Can you keep a secret?" I asked. Maris looked at me, her mouth twitching into something between a smile and a challenge. "Try me." And I told her. Not the whole plan, not the part that would make Damon's jaw lock or Loretta's voice break. Just enough to start. Just enough to make room for what was coming next. Loretta showed up Thursday afternoon with a plastic bag of curtain swatches and a tone too sweet to be genuine. "I thought these would match the light in the guest room," she said, spreading them on my kitchen table like we were planning a bridal shower. "You know how Ottilia's eyes are sensitive now. She needs soft colors." I looked at the swatches. Pale, beige, dusty lilac, a green that reminded me of hospital walls. All safe, sterile, soothing. "How thoughtful," I said, and poured her a cup of coffee. The kids came barreling in behind her. Layla and Miles, 6 and 8, loud and sticky with popsicle residue. They made a beeline for the hallway, already arguing about which room would be theirs. "Slow down," Loretta called, not even turning around. "Don't go in the sewing room." Too late. I heard the door creak, then the slap of little feet on my clean floor. "Mommy, there's a weird machine in here." "It's a sewing machine," I said, gently but firmly. "It stays exactly where it is." Loretta waved a hand. Of course, of course. They're just excited. Damon said we'll keep it covered when they're not using the room. They'll respect your things." I sipped my coffee. Bitter. Too strong. Perfect. "And where will you and Damon be sleeping?" I asked, not because I didn't know, but because I needed to hear it from her. "In the living room just for a bit. We'll set up the sofa bed this weekend. It's fine." "Really?" She leaned forward like we were girlfriends swapping secrets. "You're going to love having them here, Calla. The energy, the company. Ottilia might even help you with cooking sometimes." I nearly choked on my coffee. You know, she used to run a catering business. Not official, but people in her building paid her for tamales and empanadas. It'll be fun. Fun. That word again. They used it like a bomb, like a smokescreen, for the real invasion happening right under my roof. After they left, I walked through the house, following the trail of invisible footprints. Crayon drawings had been left on the dining table. Someone had smudged their hand along the hallway mirror. The toilet seat was up. All of it temporary, perhaps. But the kind of temporary that leaves permanent marks. I opened the drawer where I kept my important papers, birth certificates, bank statements, the deed. Everything was still in order, but my hands didn't stop shaking. By evening, I had convinced myself maybe it wasn't too late to change course. Maybe if I sat Damon down and explained clearly, logically, that I hadn't agreed, hadn't been consulted, hadn't approved any of this, he'd listen. We'd talk like grown people. So I called him. "Hey, Ma," he answered, distracted. I heard a baby crying in the background and Loretta talking loudly to someone else. "Can we talk later? We're just finishing up the U-Haul paperwork." My mouth went dry. "The what?" "The truck. For Saturday. We got a deal if we returned it same day, so we booked it already. Loretta's cousin's helping us load everything. It's all moving fast now." My throat tightened. "Did you give notice to your landlord, on Tuesday?" "Why?" "So they'd already burned their bridge before I even had a say." I said nothing for a second too long. "Ma," he said. "You okay?" "I'm fine. You sure you sound off?" "I'm just tired," I said. "Long day." "Yeah. You'll feel better once we're all together." I hung up first. Then I walked to my sewing room, sat down at the machine I'd saved 2 months of grocery money to buy, and stared at it until the streetlights came on outside. They thought the walls of this house were just drywall and paint. But every inch of it was me. And they were about to learn what that meant. Friday morning, I was up before the sun. The smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen before the birds even stirred. I drank it black, staring at the blank page of my notepad, the same one I'd used for years to track groceries, repairs, and every little corner I could cut to save a few dollars. By 7, I was dressed in slacks and a cardigan I only wore for meetings. I locked the front door behind me, pausing for a second on the porch, letting the morning air settle on my skin. My house still looked the same from the outside, but inside, I knew every boundary had been shifted by assumption, by entitlement, by a family that no longer asked but simply took. The bank opened at 8. I was there at 7:58, standing by the glass door like a woman on a mission. Because I was. "Good morning, Mrs. Trenton," said the teller, a young woman with nervous fingers and a friendly smile. "How can we help you today?" I handed over my ID. "I'd like to speak to a banker, please." "About a transfer." She guided me to a small cubicle. The banker who met me there was a man named Alan, neatly dressed, too cheerful for that early in the day. He pulled up my file on his screen and blinked. "You've been quite disciplined, Mrs. Trenton. This account's been active for nearly 10 years. No withdrawals over 500, mostly deposits." I nodded. Side jobs, sewing work, birthday money, some holiday overtime. He smiled. "What would you like to do today? I want to transfer it. A large portion of it. To a new account under a different branch." He paused, hands hovering above his keyboard. "May I ask why I just need the account to be less visible?" I said. "Fewer eyes. Just mine." He didn't question me after that. Just asked for signatures, confirmed routing numbers, and printed a receipt that felt heavier than it looked. "I'll keep the rest in this account for now," I said. "But the transfer needs to be immediate. It'll process within the hour." I tucked the receipt into my wallet, along with my driver's license, and the small note I'd written in case I forgot anything. Alan stood up and offered his hand. "Best of luck, Mrs. Trenton." "Thank you," I said. "I'm not gambling. Just playing a different game. From the bank, I didn't go home. I drove across town where the streets were quieter and the houses were smaller but neat. Front porches with wind chimes, chain-link fences with hand-painted signs, no soliciting. No exceptions. The realtor's office was inside a converted craftsman bungalow. A woman named Gloria met me at the door. She didn't recognize me at first, but I remembered her. She used to live a few blocks from my old client, Mrs. Hensley, back when I cleaned houses. Gloria's place had always had the best garden on the street, tulips and peonies, even in bad years. I'm looking to list a property quietly, I told her, and maybe buy something else. Something smaller, clean, enough space for me and no one else. Gloria tilted her head. Are you downsizing? I'm reclaiming, I said. It's a difference that matters. She offered me coffee, I declined, and pulled out some listings. I told her what I was looking for. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, decent kitchen. No HOA, no curious neighbors. By the time I left, we'd set a viewing for Monday morning and started a preliminary valuation of my current home. Discretion is important, I said as I stood up. She nodded. You won't hear a word from us until you're ready. Outside, the sky had brightened into a clear blue. I sat behind the wheel for a long moment before driving off, watching my reflection in the rearview mirror. There was something unfamiliar in my eyes. Not fear, not sadness. It looked a lot like resolve. Loretta showed up around noon, uninvited, carrying a grocery bag with bakery labels, and humming like she owned the air between us. I was in the middle of repotting my lavender fingers deep in soil on the back porch when she rounded the corner with that bright, polished grin. Thought I'd stop by, sweetheart, she said, lifting the bag like a trophy. Brought your favorite raspberry scones. Figured you might like something sweet with your coffee. Sweetheart. That word used to come from my late husband's mouth, with warmth behind it, never sugar-coated with pity or calculation. But Loretta wielded it like a glove before a slap, soft in touch, sharp in intent. I wiped my hands on my apron and forced a smile. That's thoughtful. She made herself at home like she always did, brushing past me to the kitchen without asking. The way she opened my cabinet, reached for the plates like she'd taken inventory before maybe she had. Maybe this whole invasion was plotted far longer than I realized. By the time I followed her inside, the scones were on a plate, the coffee pot humming, and she was sitting at my kitchen table like it was hers. Saturday's coming fast, she said, folding her napkin with rehearsed casualness. The kids are counting down. Ottilia, too. Poor woman barely sleeps. She's so grateful you know that you're letting her stay. Says it feels like a blessing. I stirred my coffee slowly, keeping my eyes on the spoon. Loretta leaned forward. And you, sweetheart, won't it be nice not having to be so alone anymore? There it was. The mask sliding off, that tilt of her head that made it clear she didn't mean companionship. She meant control. You're always here by yourself, she went on. It can't be easy. No one to check on you. You've been so generous. Really, we're lucky to have you. I sipped my coffee and smiled faintly, the kind of smile I'd worn at funerals and family events, where you smile because silence would scream. She stayed another 20 minutes pretending to chit-chat, all while subtly referring to our side of the closet, the kids' corner and Ottilia's bathroom needs. I nodded, agreed softly, all the while pressing my thumbnail into the side of my palm, beneath the table just to stay grounded. After she left, I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the silence. Not savoring it, but measuring it like water in a well about to dry. That afternoon, I went to the bottom drawer of my bedroom dresser, the one nobody else ever opened. Buried under a few moth-eaten sweaters was a small notebook, soft at the corners, its paper creased and yellowed from age and time. It wasn't a diary, just a list. Names, dates, decisions I'd regretted, people I'd forgiven too easily, things I should have said, things I should have done. Every entry was a version of myself I'd left behind, a version that gave too much too quickly. I took it out to the backyard, lit a match, and dropped the pages one by one into the old metal pail I used to burn garden scraps. The fire caught quickly, curling up the edges of every line I'd once penned in sorrow. I watched the smoke rise until it faded into the branches above. The weight didn't vanish, but it shifted back where it belonged. Inside the house, I washed my hands slowly in the kitchen sink, letting the warm water run until it steamed the windows. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. Older, yes, but steadier than I'd looked in years. I dried my hands and reached for my phone. It was time to make the next call. I didn't need much. The box was small, barely deeper than a nightstand drawer, and I placed it on the quilted bench at the foot of my bed. I'd sewn that quilt myself years ago, back when my hands ached less and my heart had more patience. Tonight, though, I moved slowly, deliberately, like someone folding the last page of a long chapter. My sewing machine went in first. The old Singer, clunky, stubborn, and mine. It still had bits of thread tangled in the bobbin from a hem I'd repaired last week. I padded it with a thick flannel shirt and tucked in a plastic pouch filled with my best needles and spools of navy white and charcoal thread. Next came my passport. It hadn't been touched in 3 years, but I wanted it with me. Proof that I still existed on paper, still had choices. Then the photos, just a few. Layla at her 5th birthday party, frosting on her nose. Jace holding a glitter-covered pine cone like it was gold. And one of all 5 grandkids on my back steps' shoes kicked off juice boxes in hand. That day, the sun had touched them like it was proud. I wrapped the photos in tissue and tucked them in with my clothes. Just essentials jeans, a few cardigans, a soft white blouse my daughter used to say, made me look put together. The rest would stay behind. In the bottom drawer of my file cabinet, under old tax returns and insurance papers, sat 2 items that didn't look like much, but meant everything, now the deed to the house and the signed sale agreement. The ink had barely dried. I placed them in a fireproof folder and then slid it into a canvas tote that would not leave my side. I didn't cry. I didn't pace the floor or stare out the window or ask why any of this had to happen. I just moved. When I finished taping the box shut, I carried it down to the front closet and placed it behind the coats. Then I walked to the kitchen and made myself a fresh cup of black coffee. No cream, no sugar. Just bold and bitter real. I sat in my chair by the window, wrapped the shawl around my shoulders, and took a slow sip. The street was quiet. Porch lights glowed like sentinels along the block. I could hear the faint hum of someone's TV down the road, maybe a rerun or a late-night game. This was what they wanted to take from me. Not just rooms or square footage, not just a spare bed or the right to redecorate. It was this moment, this stillness that they didn't value, couldn't understand. A kind of freedom that came not from running away, but from finally sitting in your own skin and knowing you belonged there. I thought of Loretta's voice earlier that day, chirping on the phone about curtain rods and mattress delivery windows. Damon had texted once to say they'd be arriving mid-morning Saturday with the first load. I didn't reply. My name was still on every piece of paperwork. My bank account had already moved what mattered. My steps had been quiet but precise. And now all that remained was to breathe rest and wait for the sun to rise. I poured the last bit of coffee into the sink, washed the mug, and placed it back on the drying rack like I always did. Then I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. Tomorrow would be the real beginning. The sun rose earlier than usual that Saturday, or maybe I just hadn't slept as deeply. I was already dressed and had my coffee brewed by the time the sound of a diesel engine rumbled down my quiet street. From the front window, I saw it an oversized moving truck, creeping up to the curb like a trespasser, trying not to wake the house. Loretta's SUV followed close behind. Damon must have still been at work because he wasn't driving. Loretta parked crookedly across my neighbor's mailbox, and within seconds she was out, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched like a crown. 3 men jumped from the back of the truck. One lit a cigarette. One adjusted a shoulder brace. The third started unlatching the cargo ramp. I didn't flinch. I walked to the front door, opened it wide, and stood in the center of the frame. Loretta spotted me and smiled all teeth. "Morning, Calla. We're right on schedule." Hope you had time to clear the guest room. I didn't move. You won't be needing that truck. Her smile faltered. What I said, I repeated, you won't be needing that truck. Nothing's coming into this house. The movers paused. One of them looked at Loretta for direction. Another glanced up at the house number as if double-checking they had the right place. Calla, Loretta said, stepping closer. I know this adjustment is hard, but we already gave notice to the landlord. The kids are excited. Ottilia sold her dining set. This is happening. No, I said, calmly. It isn't. But Damon said you agreed. He said I didn't. Silence thickened the porch. Even the cigarette smoke seemed to hesitate midair. Loretta blinked fast. We signed papers yesterday. Everything's boxed. Everything's packed. Then you'll need to find somewhere else to unpack it. The movers looked increasingly uncomfortable. One of them started re-latching the ramp, slow and uncertain. Loretta didn't notice she was staring at me like I'd just spoken in a language she couldn't translate. You're seriously turning us away. I'm not turning anyone away, I said. I'm keeping my door closed. There's a difference. But where are we supposed to go? That's something you and Damon should have asked before making plans. Her lips pressed tight. We have nowhere. The kids, I held up a hand, not unkindly, but firm. Don't use them. Don't put their names in your mouth like it absolves your choices. I don't understand you, she whispered, finally losing the edge in her voice. You were always kind. Always agreeable. I was quiet, I corrected her. There's a difference. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mrs. Lawton across the street, pretending to weed her rosebed. 2 joggers slowed to pass the scene. The driver of the moving truck had taken out his phone, either checking for new instructions or trying not to be involved. Loretta's arms hung at her sides now, loose and lost. The power she carried like perfume had begun to fade. We thought we'd have time to get settled, she said. We were going to help with groceries, utilities. We weren't just taking. I studied her. For once, I saw not the orchestrator of entitlement, but a woman who'd built a story around someone else's life and now stood stunned when that life spoke back. You built a plan, I said, but you forgot to ask the owner of the land. Loretta looked over her shoulder at the truck, then back to me. So that's it. I nodded. That's it. The first mover said quietly, Ma'am, should we? Unload nothing, I said. He nodded and climbed back into the cab. Loretta stood on the porch, like a statue half-chiseled, frozen between command and collapse. You can use my driveway to turn around, I said, stepping back into the house. And then I closed the door. Damon didn't knock. He never did. That was part of the problem. He burst through the front door like he was still 15 and hungry, slamming it behind him with all the weight of a man used to being obeyed. I was sitting on the living room couch, hands folded, coffee cooling beside me. I didn't rise to meet his temper. You told Loretta we couldn't move in? He barked. What the hell, Mom? I didn't tell her. I said, not blinking. I showed her. He ran a hand through his hair. Pacing, nostrils flared. Do you have any idea what you've done? We gave notice. The lease ends tomorrow. The kids are still your children, I interrupted gently. Not mine. They are your responsibility. He froze. You're being cold. I shrugged. No colder than the way you handed me a decision wrapped in finality and called it family. His voice dropped an octave. You sold the house? Yes. Without talking to us, I met his eyes. Like you talked to me. He stepped forward like proximity might make me back down. You're being unreasonable. We're family. And yet you arrived here with boxes before asking if you were welcome. You know we can't afford another place. I thought you of all people would understand struggle. I stood. Slowly. Calmly. Don't mistake my history for your entitlement. He scoffed. You're unbelievable. No, Damon. I'm finally believable. For once in my life, I'm saying what I mean. For once, I'm choosing me. He shook his head. What about the kids? What about Loretta's mom? What about me? His jaw tightened. The house is sold, I said. The contract is signed. The deed is processed. The check is cleared. You didn't even give me a chance to talk you out of it. That's the point. His face twisted. This is selfish. I exhaled, not angry, just tired. For once. He laughed bitterly, then started toward the hallway. I'm taking the lockbox. You won't find it. He turned. What the papers are with my lawyer. The key is mine. The lock has been changed. You change the locks, I change the rules. He stared at me like I was a ghost of someone he once knew. I gave you 40 years. Of yes, I said, voice steady. I gave you bedtime stories, doctor visits, clothes I patched by hand. I gave you summers at the lake when I barely had gas in the car. And I never complained. He said nothing. But you mistook my giving for permanence, for permission. You assumed I'd keep sacrificing even when I had nothing left to offer. You decided that the home I scraped and bled for would now be yours by default. I just thought I know what you thought I said. You thought I'd fold like I always have, but I'm not folding, Damon. I'm finished. His shoulders dropped, but there was still fire behind his eyes. I'll get a lawyer. You're welcome to try. But you'll need one with a time machine. He looked around the room at the boxes that weren't there, at the walls that no longer belonged to us. He realized then he hadn't lost a house. He'd lost control. You'll regret this, he muttered, voice cracking. Maybe I said, but I won't regret not letting you walk over me again. He walked toward the door, then turned back. I don't even recognize you. That's because for the first time in decades, I said, you're seeing me. He slammed the door so hard, the frame shuddered, but I didn't. I walked over, turned the deadbolt, and listened to the silence he left behind. Maris's old sedan pulled up at 7:01, just like she said it would. No honk, no rush, just that gentle rhythm of a woman who knew how to respect another's timing. I locked the door behind me, though it wasn't mine anymore. The new owners wouldn't get the keys until next week, but the house already felt like it belonged to the past. I had taken what mattered. The last few boxes sat neatly by the curb, my sewing machine, a suitcase, a folded quilt, and a tin box that once held tea, but now held every paper that proved who I was and what I'd earned. Maris didn't ask questions. She simply popped the trunk and helped me lift the boxes in. We worked in silence, the kind that only exists between two women who've known too much and judged too little. You good? She finally asked when I buckled in beside her. I'm free, I said. She nodded, started the car, and pulled away. Neither of us looked back. The drive to the neighboring town was less than 20 miles, but it felt like a different world entirely. No cracked sidewalk where Damon scraped his knees. No corner store where I used to buy juice boxes. No memories cluttering the streets. Just quiet roads, fresh trees, and houses with numbers no one had memorized. We pulled up to a one-story bungalow painted cream with charcoal trim. Small porch. A patch of lavender blooming near the mailbox. The grass had been cut recently, and the realtor's sign was gone, just like I'd asked. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. Maris turned off the ignition. Looks like it's been waiting for you. I smiled. I think it has. She helped me carry the boxes inside. The air smelled faintly of pine cleaner and paint. Not cedar, thank God, but clean. The living room had 2 windows, enough light for mornings. The kitchen was bright and compact. There were only 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for guests if I ever decided to have any. Everything was quiet. No kids running down hallways. No Loretta talking over me with false sweetness. No shoes dumped at the entry. Just the soft echo of my own breath. Maris placed the sewing machine on the small table in the back room, then turned to me. You sure no one knows where this is? Only you and the bank think he'll come looking. He might, but the house is sold. My name's off the title. Even if he finds the address, it won't mean anything. She looked at me for a long moment. You really did it. I did. She opened the fridge, empty, but clean. Want to get groceries later? I think I'd like that. Dinner's on me tonight, she said. Celebration. I didn't say anything. Just walked to the small window over the sink and looked out at the fenced yard. A bird fluttered onto the feeder. The wind stirred the lavender just enough to make it dance. This was what freedom sounded like nothing. After Mary's left, I unpacked slowly. I placed my grandkids' photos on a narrow shelf in the hallway, hung up my favorite coat in the lone closet, opened the sewing machine case and set it near the window where the light hit best. I made myself coffee and drank it hot for once, standing barefoot in my own kitchen. No one knew this address. No one could show up without warning. No one could fill my space with their noise and decisions and demands. This place was mine, not just by contract, but by choice. And the best part, I had vanished. On my own terms. Tomorrow, I'd tell no one, except maybe the woman in the mirror who had finally come home. The morning started like the others. A quiet stretch, a warm floor under my bare feet, the comforting bitterness of black coffee curling up from my favorite mug. I'd left the curtains half drawn so the morning light could reach my little table. I was threading a new bobbin when my phone rang. I let it buzz once, twice, then picked up. Mom. I didn't say anything. It's Damon. I could tell he was trying to sound casual, but there was tension under his voice. I imagined him standing in some borrowed living room or leaning against a kitchen counter that wasn't his. He didn't ask where I was. The kids, they miss you. That was the first card he played. I swallowed slow. They're welcome to visit, as guests. There was silence on his end, just the faint hum of static. You don't mean that. Come on, Mom. This isn't like you. You don't know what I'm like anymore. His sigh was long and theatrical. We're staying with Loretta's cousin for now. It's tight. The kids are on the floor. Ottilia's on a mattress in the laundry room. I didn't ask why that was my problem. I just thought you'd want to know, he added. I'm sorry it's hard, I said softly. But that was your decision. Another pause. They're confused. They don't understand why their grandma disappeared. I didn't disappear. I moved. He didn't respond, but I heard him breathing. Not crying. Just working himself into something. You always said family came first. I did. I put you first for 40 years. We needed help. You didn't ask for help. You made a plan and informed me after it was too late. Then something colder crept into his voice. So that's it. You're just done. I'm not done being a mother, I said. But I am done being a doormat. I ended the call before he could speak again. The phone buzzed immediately. A text. Loretta, I thought you loved them. Not I thought you loved us. No, them. The kids. As if she already knew my love for her and Damon had limits, but she could still use the children to wedge guilt into my bones. I stared at the message for a long time. It was short. Tactical. Aimed like a knife at the softest part of me. I didn't reply. I turned the phone off. Powered it all the way down and placed it face down in the drawer beneath the kitchen sink. It was like closing a door in my mind. I sat back down at my sewing table, turned up the radio, and let a slow country song drift into the quiet. My hands moved on their own, cutting, pinning, threading, stitching. Each motion steady. Each piece of fabric becoming something entirely new. My coffee had gone lukewarm again, but I didn't mind. They could text. They could call. They could say I was cold or cruel or selfish. But I knew better now. Guilt wasn't a sign of love, it was a chain, and I had finally stopped wearing it. I finished the hem on the sleeve and smiled. It was perfect, and tomorrow I'd start the next piece. He knocked twice. Sharp, deliberate. I'd been expecting him, though not quite so soon. I opened the door slowly, looked him over. Mid-40s. Crisp gray suit, leather briefcase in one hand. Apology already forming behind his eyes. Mrs. Trenton, that's me. I'm Miles Ferris, legal counsel representing Damon Trenton. I stepped aside without a word. He walked in like someone used to confrontation softened by paperwork. I led him to the dining table where two chairs sat opposite each other. My coffee was already poured. I didn't offer him any. He didn't ask. He opened the briefcase and removed a neat folder. Your son is concerned, ma'am. He's confused by your recent decisions. The sale of the house, the relocation, the lack of contact. Confused, I said. Miles gave a polite nod. He believes these changes may indicate impaired judgment, possibly the result of stress or diminished capacity. There it was, the quiet cruelty wrapped in concern. Diminished capacity, he continued. He's asked us to begin the process of reviewing the legality of the property transfer. He believes the transaction may have been coerced or made under duress, possibly without full comprehension. I didn't interrupt him. I let the whole ugly suggestion breathe in the air. When he finally stopped, I reached into the drawer beside me. I pulled out a manila envelope and set it down on the table. You'll want to read this. He hesitated just long enough to let me know he wasn't expecting resistance. Inside were copies of every document, the listing agreement, the sale contract, the title transfer, notarized, dated, the wire confirmation from the bank, the moving company invoice, a copy of the letter I'd written to the realtor. He read each item carefully, his fingers moving through the pages slower and slower. And here I added, pulling out one last paper, a log of phone calls, dates, times, duration. Every conversation I had with the realtor, the bank, the buyer, it's all here. He looked up. You were thorough. I had to be. There was no malice in my voice. Just fact. Damon said this was sudden. It wasn't. He believes you acted irrationally. I acted alone. There's a difference. He closed the file slowly. May I ask, why now? Because I knew what was coming, I said. The minute they walked into my house and said, we already decided, I knew they didn't see me anymore. Just square footage and free childcare. He looked down again, then cleared his throat. I don't see any reason to proceed further, not legally. Everything here is clear, consensual. You were of sound mind, detailed. I nodded. I planned this. Fully. He stood. I'll let him know. You do that. He lingered at the door for a moment. I've seen a lot of cases like this, he said. Usually it's the other way around, older parents trying to control their children's assets. Rare to see one flip the script so neatly. It's not a script, I said. It's my life. He gave a small, almost respectful nod, then walked back down the path to his car. When the door closed behind him, I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I didn't feel victorious. I felt intact. There's a difference. I walked back to my sewing machine and picked up where I'd left off. The fabric was a deep red. Warm. Honest. Not for anyone else. Just mine. The envelope was pink and bent at one corner, tucked between two pieces of junk mail as if it didn't matter. But I saw the handwriting immediately round and careful, like someone trying hard to spell everything right. I sat at the table and opened it slowly. Dear Grandma, we miss you. Mommy says you moved to a different house. Daddy says you're mad. I don't know what's true, but I miss cookies and sewing and the way you let us put marshmallows in the popcorn. Can we visit? Love, Layla. There was a picture drawn on the back. 3 stick figures, one tall with gray hair, 2 small with big smiles. She'd written our names under each one. Mine was in purple. I held the card for a long time before I moved. By the time dinner rolled around, I had written a letter back. Folded, sealed, addressed to their new place wherever Damon and Loretta had landed. I imagined Loretta opening it. Maybe her jaw would tighten. Maybe she'd say something sharp. But she would read every word. Inside was a simple message. Dear Layla, thank you for your letter. I miss you too. You and Jace are welcome to visit this Saturday afternoon. Please have your dad bring you, and please tell him this is not a sleepover. He may drop you off at noon and pick you up by 6. We will bake cookies, do some sewing, and watch a movie. I'll make sure to have marshmallows ready. Love, Grandma. Saturday came with bright skies and cautious hope. At noon, Sharp Damon's car pulled up out front. He didn't come to the door. He just stayed in the driver's seat while Layla and Jace bounded up the walkway with backpacks and wild energy. Hi, Grandma. Layla flung herself into my arms without hesitation. Jace followed, slightly more reserved, but his eyes lit up when he saw the kitchen counter lined with flour and mixing bowls. I didn't ask questions about their parents. I didn't bring up the house. And they didn't ask why I had moved or where my old house had gone. Children know more than they say, and what they want most is the feeling that someone's glad they're there. We started with the cookies, chocolate chip with cinnamon. Layla cracked eggs like a pro. Jace dumped in the sugar with both hands. I let them lick the beaters and press the dough with mismatched spoons. After the trays were in the oven, we moved to the sewing room. I had laid out fabric scraps, needles, and thread. Nothing sharp, nothing complicated. Just felt buttons and patterns easy for little fingers. Layla made a pillow for her doll. Jace stitched 2 felt squares together and called it a monster pouch. He insisted it was for catching dreams. We watched The Parent Trap. After that, my copy old and scratched, but still working. The kids curled up on either side of me under the same quilt I'd brought from the old house. They laughed. They whispered commentary. They passed the popcorn bowl between them, careful not to spill. I let them have marshmallows. At 5:50, I got them washed up and packed their things. At 6:02, Damon's car pulled back into the driveway. He didn't get out. I walked the kids to the curb, kissed their foreheads, and handed them off without a word. They waved through the back window as the car pulled away. I stood there a moment after they were gone. Not sad, not triumphant, just still. Back inside, the couch held the shape of 2 small bodies. The kitchen still smelled like sugar. A few popcorn kernels were tucked beneath the coffee table. The house had been full, but it had not been taken. And that made all the difference. They didn't knock. They never did even now. I saw their car from the window before I heard the steps on my porch. Loretta walked ahead, lips tight. Damon trailed behind her, fists tucked in his pockets, like a boy who'd already been told no, but wanted to hear it again, just to be sure. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. Calla, Loretta said. We need to talk. I didn't answer. I simply waited. Damon cleared his throat. We saw Layla's drawing on the fridge, the one she made during the visit. That's between me and her. He nodded like he'd expected the answer, but Loretta was less patient. You really think this is okay? She said, voice climbing. Cutting us off, sneaking around, turning the kids into messengers? You're teaching them the wrong lesson. I tilted my head. And what lesson would you rather I teach? That it's polite to bulldoze your way into someone's home and call it love. She opened her mouth again, but Damon raised a hand. Let me, he said to her, then turned to me. This isn't you, Mom. You used to be kind. I didn't flinch. No. I used to be quiet. He blinked like the wind had shifted. It's not the same. It is. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me. No need to let them into the calm I'd built. You confuse kindness with compliance, I said. You think saying yes to everyone every time, no matter the cost, that's love. That's what you want from me. It's not like that. It is exactly like that. Loretta folded her arms. We're family. And family doesn't mean you get to take whatever you want and call it a favor. She scoffed. We weren't stealing. We needed help. You needed a house. You needed a plan. You made one, but you made it on top of me. And I'm no longer laying down for it." Damon looked away. The lines in his forehead deepened, the ones that used to appear when he was lying as a child. "I just want things back the way they were." "Which part?" I asked. "When I stayed up late sewing your Halloween costumes, and you never noticed I had to work a double shift the next day, when I gave up vacations so you could join sports camps, or when I let you walk into my home with boxes and demands, and didn't speak a word until I'd already disappeared." He didn't answer. "The version of me you miss," I continued, "was never me. She was survival. She was silence. And she's not coming back." Loretta shook her head. "So what now? You just live out here alone like some bitter old woman hiding from your own family." "No," I said. "I'm choosing who gets to cross my threshold. And bitterness has nothing to do with it. Peace does." Damon's shoulders dropped. "You're really done with us." "I'm done pretending you didn't hurt me." The silence that followed was different from the ones we'd shared before. It wasn't awkward or uncomfortable. It was acknowledgement. It was the sound of something crumbling that had never truly been stable to begin with. Loretta looked away first. "Come on," she muttered. They walked off the porch. Damon glanced back once, then got into the passenger seat. Loretta drove this time, and I watched them go. When I stepped back inside, I didn't lock the door out of fear. I locked it out of choice. And when I turned back to the living room, my sewing table waited just where I'd left it. It started small, just a flyer at the library, pinned between a piano recital and a missing cat. Quilting circle, all ages welcome. No experience needed. I took the slip with the phone number and folded it into my wallet next to my grocery list and the receipt from my very first purchase in the new town, a ceramic butter dish with little blue flowers. I didn't call right away. I waited 2 days, thought about it during coffee while pinning fabric while listening to the hum of the washing machine. Then on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, I dialed the number. The woman who answered Teresa sounded warm. Not too perky, not forced. Just kind. "We meet Thursdays," she said. "Bring whatever you're working on, or nothing at all. Just bring yourself." So I did. The community center was old but well kept. White walls, wooden floors, windows that let in the good kind of light. There were 7 women when I arrived, some older than me, some younger. One girl couldn't have been more than 16, her headphones still dangling from her neck, as she stitched bright squares together with uneven rows. They welcomed me like I'd always been there. No questions about where I came from or who I'd left behind. Just space. And thread. I brought a piece I'd started years ago and never finished, a patchwork of blues and warm browns, soft cottons, from old dresses and dish towels I hadn't been able to throw out. I didn't explain its meaning. They didn't ask. The rhythm returned faster than I expected. Cut, stitch, pull, breathe, repeat. By the 3rd week, Teresa asked if I'd be willing to teach a basics class for beginners. "You've got a calm way," she said. "Some folks need that more than instruction." I said yes without hesitating. The following month, I started teaching every Tuesday morning. A few teenagers, 2 retirees, and a young mother who came in between night shifts. We stitched in silence, or we laughed, or we talked about things that had nothing to do with houses or families or what we owed anyone. I posted photos of our group on a new account I made online, just my name and a gallery of colors. Pictures of quilts in progress, stacks of folded fabric, crooked first attempts. Proud, finished ones. I didn't post my face. Just my hands, my thread, the beauty we made out of scraps. The account didn't blow up. I didn't go viral, but a few dozen people followed. Then 100. Then 2. Kind comments. Encouragement. A stranger named June from Oregon messaged to say she'd been inspired to start sewing again after 20 years. I read that message 3 times and saved it. Joy came back slowly, but it stayed. It wasn't the kind that asked permission or came only when someone else approved. It was quiet, rooted mine, the kind that arrived at the end of a long day when the seams lined up just right, the kind that came in the smell of pressed cotton, in the shuffle of folding chairs, in watching someone's nervous fingers finally finish their first square. At home, my shelves filled with fabric again, my cupboards with simple groceries, my hours with meaning that asked for nothing back but presence. No guilt, no apologies, no second guessing. I didn't miss the noise. I didn't miss the sacrifice dressed up as duty. I missed the kids, yes. But even that ache had softened because now I knew I could love them without giving myself away. I put the final stitch into a quilt I'd started just for me. The label on the back read, Calla Trenton, 2025. No permission needed. And that night, I slept like the woman I'd become. Whole, steady, and finally home. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock. Not the hard, entitled thud I'd grown used to. Just a soft, uncertain tapping. I looked through the curtain, half expecting a delivery or a neighbor with a package. But it was Damon. He stood with his hands in his pockets, shoulders drawn up like he wasn't sure he should be there. No car in the driveway. He must have walked. That alone told me something had shifted. I opened the door but didn't say a word. "I'm not here to argue," he said. "I'm not here to explain. I just want to talk." I stepped aside and let him in. He didn't sit until I did. We both took chairs at the kitchen table where the sun caught the edge of the mug I'd left from earlier. I didn't offer him coffee. He didn't ask. "I was wrong," he said after a moment. The words came out flat, but not empty. "I thought I was just trying to protect my family, make things easier. I didn't realize I was steamrolling you in the process." I didn't respond. I just let him speak. "I keep thinking about what you said, about how I only saw you when you were giving, how I never really stopped to ask what you needed. I've replayed that conversation in my head more times than I can count." I watched him carefully. Not out of anger, but to see if this was the performance of regret or the labor of honesty. "I didn't come here to ask for anything," he said. "Not a place to stay, not forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I get it now, or I'm starting to." The silence between us stretched. Not tense, just full. "I didn't sell the house to punish you," I said. He nodded. "I know. I did it to protect myself. I know that too." He looked older than the last time I'd seen him. Not in the face, but in the way he sat, like a man who'd finally realized what it costs to take too much from the people who give without limits. "I miss the kids," I said softly. His eyes flickered. "They miss you too. They talk about the marshmallows." A faint smile touched my mouth. "That's something." He rubbed his palms on his jeans. "Layla keeps asking why things changed. I didn't know what to tell her. Tell her I stopped being afraid of disappointing people who weren't afraid to disappoint me." That made him wince. But he didn't argue. "I know I have a lot to fix," he said, "and maybe not all of it is fixable, but I'm trying." That's all I came to say. I nodded. "You can try, but you'll do it from your own space on your own terms." He looked me in the eye. I wouldn't expect anything else. I stood. He stood with me. "You can visit," I said, "but you call first. You ask. And you don't show up with plans already made." "I understand." He turned to go, then hesitated. "I'm proud of you, you know." I tilted my head. "For what?" "For choosing yourself. I didn't know how much that mattered until I watched you do it." He walked out slowly, closing the door with quiet hands. I didn't watch him leave. Instead, I went back to the sewing room and picked up the project I'd left folded on the table. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting the fire that shaped me, but maybe it meant letting go of the need to keep it burning. The guest room didn't need much, just clean sheets, sunlight, and something soft enough to say, "You're welcome here, but not entitled to stay." I'd spent the week sewing a new quilt, a small one, with warm colors, moss green, soft gold, deep burgundy. Each piece stitched with the steady, quiet certainty I'd earned over the last year. It wasn't for show. It wasn't for approval. It was just mine, made with care, offered without apology. When I finished it, I folded it once across the guest bed. The light from the window fell on it just right, and for a moment I stood back and simply admired what my hands could still create. I placed a small vase near the windowsill, one single flower clipped from the garden out back. A bright orange zinnia. Bold, unapologetic. Then I waited. At 4:02 on Friday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I didn't rush to open it. I took one more glance at the hallway mirror to make sure I looked like myself. Calla Trenton, not the shadow of someone who used to stay silent. Layla stood there, holding a small bag hair in two uneven braids. Jace stood beside her, gripping a comic book and blinking up at me like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to smile yet. I opened the door fully. "Right on time," I said. "Hi," Grandma Layla said, stepping forward and hugging me without hesitation. "Hi," Jace mumbled, but I could see his mouth twitching toward a grin. Damon was at the curb engine running. He gave a small wave, not a request. Just a gesture. I nodded back. When I closed the door, it didn't feel like closing them out. It felt like letting the right ones in. The kids dropped their bags in the hallway. "Do we still get popcorn with marshmallows?" Jace asked. "You tell me," I said, pointing to the kitchen counter where the bowls were already set out. They raced past me like a breeze, light, unburdened. We baked oatmeal cookies this time. Watched an old black and white movie they pretended not to like, but sat through anyway. Layla fell asleep early, curled under the new quilt in the guest room. Jace stayed up a little later, asking questions about how sewing machines worked. I told him slowly, honestly, answering each one like it mattered. When I finally went to bed, the house didn't feel invaded. It felt lived in. It felt right. In the morning, we'd make pancakes, and in the evening, Damon would pick them up. But tonight, there was no tension, no hidden resentment, no forced smiles. Only the sound of two small people breathing quietly down the hall and the steady hum of a life I had built, not inherited, not surrendered, not negotiated into, but chosen. The family I wanted was still possible, but only now because the version of me standing here no longer apologized for existing.